Can you guys believe that it's already been 1 full year of my ownership of this Mark V Toyota Supra? Well, it has, and today it's time to talk about it. What's going on, everyone? Back with another episode of Stuff and Things. Today I'm finally getting around to giving you guys a full review of my 2023 Toyota Mark V Supra build. I have owned this car exactly a year now, and I am absolutely loving it. Everything about it, as a daily driver, as a fun weekend kind of getaway car. I try to drive this car as much as possible, and luckily right now in Colorado we have some great weather, so I've been driving this thing pretty much every day for the past week now, and hopefully this weather continues. As much as I love snow, I think I love driving this car just a little bit more. Now, there is a lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to this platform, and there is a lot of hate, so let's address that first and foremost. In 2020, Toyota decided to re-release the Supra. The Mark IV gained a cult following with all of its pop culture references, all of the crazy builds out there on the internet, and it's just a really iconic car. It has gotten to a point now where it is so hyped up that a lot of people start to hate on the Mark IV, and they really don't like them anymore. So when Toyota got around to re-releasing the Supra, they came out with this car right here, the Mark V, and they did it in a collaboration with BMW. So a lot of people see this car and they immediately hate on it because I guess some people out there are Toyota enthusiasts, people out there are Toyota purists, and because this shares a lot in common with the BMW Z4, they don't like the drivetrain, they just hate the car entirely because of that collaboration. So I definitely hear that hate all over the internet, but what it comes down to is, are you a true car enthusiast? A lot of people look at the Mark V Supra and say that a collaboration between Toyota and BMW, they're kind of chalking it up as like a bad thing, but in reality, have you heard of a terrible BMW performance car? Now, I've had the privilege of driving around in quite a few different BMWs, a 335i, a few different M3s, even an M5 once. I think I even took a ride in a competition before, and if you're a true car enthusiast, then there shouldn't be a whole lot of hate around this car. If you own one, if you talk about one, you're still gonna get comments, oh, that's not a Toyota, it's a BMW, and I totally get that. If you are a Toyota purist and you're a fan of the Mark IV, then there's a good chance that you're not going to like this. That being said though, let's talk about the numbers real quick between a Mark IV and a Mark V Supra. The Toyota Supra first appeared in Japan in about 1978, and the production continued up until 2002. All of the revisions eventually culminated into the Mark IV with a pretty wild and sought-after engine. The Mark IV was offered with 2 different engine options. The first one, a naturally aspirated 2JZ GE, which was a 3-liter straight 6 with 220 horsepower and 210 foot-pounds of torque. And then if you go all the way up to the big bad brother, you have a 2JZ GTE option, which was a 3.0 liter twin turbocharged straight 6 with 320 horsepower and 315 foot-pounds of torque. So people, of course, love the Mark IV. I'm still personally a fan of it myself, but when it came to this car, a lot of people think, the 2JZ twin turbo, it's going to be way faster than anything that they're producing now, especially in collaboration with BMW. But what most people don't understand is that when you are purchasing a Supra, especially if you want the biggest and baddest one out there, you're gonna go with a 3.0. They do offer a 2.0 version, and that car, I believe, is coming with 255 horsepower with 295 foot-pounds of torque. That, of course, is a smaller 2-liter engine, but when you bump up to the big bad boy, the 3.0 GR Supra, for the year of 2023, which this car is, it went under a little bit of revisions, and this car is now powered with a 3.0 liter inline 6 with a twin scroll turbocharger, putting out 382 horsepower and 368 foot-pounds of torque stock. So of course we're talking about almost 20 years of difference there, but there is so much more refinement that goes into this car that the power is obviously way better than ever before, and in my opinion, it's not even really a competition. So now a quick backstory on this car from my personal ownership. If you guys have not caught the video of when I actually picked this thing up, I was originally interested in the new GR86 because it's an affordable, fun sports car. It wasn't until the Mark V Supra went through 3 different generations, 2000, 2001, and 2002, that they finally released a 6-speed manual transmission in 2023. As soon as Toyota made that announcement, that is when I decided to shift gears and save up more money and opt for, in my opinion, probably the better car, a little bit more fun, more power, little bit more aftermarket things that you can do with a drivetrain and just a platform like this. Now, I was searching around the entire country, couldn't find anything until about like October timeframe. There were 6 cars allocated to dealers all around the country, but none of them were in the exact spec that I wanted. So I was able to get connected with Quality Toyota, a small kind of mom and pop Toyota dealership out of Independence, Kansas. I developed a really cool relationship with them, and they were able to find me this car in the exact spec very early on. And because of that, I've spent a whole lot of time with this car, and I have a lot of good impressions to give you guys today. So before we get into the driving section of this video, while we're sitting here parked, let's talk about some of the modifications that I've done to this car. And I'll break these parts up into chapters, so if you guys are looking for something specific, you can check out the chapter links in the description down below. So in no real particular order here, we're just going to start from more of the aesthetic stuff on the outside of the car. I should also mention that all of these modifications that we're talking about have been documented on video, so if you check out the Supra playlist here on the channel, I'll leave a link for it right up here in the corner. You can actually find dedicated videos for everything that we're talking about. The first thing was, of course, the vinyl wrap done by Lucid Wraps here in Denver, Colorado. I, of course, wrapped this in my signature Psy camo with orange accents all over the place. We have a rugged texture black roof on here, and this is a very difficult vehicle to wrap. Anyone who has a wrap Supra out there probably knows how curvy this thing is and how difficult stretching some of the vinyl or seaming the vinyl together to fit on the car is. This car is garage kept, and so far everything is holding up pretty perfectly. Now, coming around to the front of the car, one of the more recent things that I did was this Arma-Speed Aero kit. It comes with the front lip on each side, as well as the side skirts, and then some pieces on the rear diffuser there. I've only had that on for a few days now, but so far I'm really loving the look. It's all true carbon impregnated with foam, so it adds a little bit of extra rigidity, better aerodynamics, extreme style. It's really a subtle touch, but for anyone who knows this car knows how unique this kit looks compared to some other kind of bolt-on pieces that you have to cut and drill your car for, so I'm a big fan of that. To go along with the Arma-Speed accents, I also have their wind deflectors. One of the biggest problems with the Mark V Supra is wind buffeting. If you're going over 25, 30 miles an hour with your windows down, you're gonna get that crazy buffeting helicopter sound inside the cabin. So I have some carbon accents there which push the air out around the window, and you can cruise at any speed now with the windows down. I also did carbon fiber mirror caps, and then coming around to the back, I also added a Cybon spoiler. This kind of pays homage to some of the Mark IVs out there. It's very reminiscent in style, so that's why I opted for that. I don't like the big, ugly, gaudy wings. I think this one, at least in my opinion, fits the car better than anything else out there. Let's see, what else do we have on the car? I guess we can talk about wheels, tires, and suspension. The wheels and tires on this thing are still completely stock. The only thing I added were these little Supra logos where the chrome Toyota logo used to be. I do actually like the spec of these wheels. They are relatively light, and so far the wheel and tire combo has been great. Originally I thought about changing them early on, but I'm at the point now where I think I'm just gonna roll with it stock, because everything on this car right now is pretty much bolt-on, and I could return this car back to stock fairly easily. Now, when it comes to suspension, again, I have a full video on that install. I'm running the HKS Touring setup, and the reason for that is because this car comes with electronic controlled dampening for the suspension. I wanted to retain that kind of factory adjustment that it has. So it allowed me to lower the car just a little bit. They are essentially just like lowering springs with a little bit of adjustability, and I think it really cleans up the wheel gap. It makes the car look great. And then I'm also running wheel spacers. I believe I'm running 12 millimeter up front and 15 in the rear, something along those lines. You guys can reference my older video if you want to check out the exact spec on those. Also up front, I changed a little bit more of the suspension. I added a component from German Auto Solutions, which is a monoball unit, which basically sticks into or presses into the lower control arm. From factory, the car uses some pretty like generic bushings, so having a monoball unit in there out of billet aluminum with a little bit of adjustability, it's a really nice touch, and it just makes the car a little bit more responsive when cornering really hard. Now, moving further back the car here, I guess we also have the Racing accent, so I have some custom Racing tow hooks in the front and rear, because that is one of the things that you need when you go to a track. I also have something to match on the interior there. I have a custom kind of paint matched Raysang shift knob wrapped in Alcantara. I used to run Raysang stuff on my old STI, so I'm absolutely still loving their products, and they make some of the highest quality car components that you could possibly buy. And then I guess I'll include the hood and everything underneath here all the way back to the exhaust and exterior. So to go along with the Armaspeed components, one of the first things that I did was an Armaspeed cold air intake, again carbon to match everything else. That added some amazing performance and sound to the vehicle. Also their strut tower support braces, kind of cleaning up the engine bay a little bit. At the end of the day, this is not a show car, so I don't truly care what it looks like under the hood, but for right now, it's pretty dang clean. So Armaspeed intake feeding into that turbo. On the back side of the turbo, we have a 5-inch catless downpipe, which then feeds into a full titanium Boost Logic exhaust setup. For that exhaust, I opted for the F16 style tips on there, which probably gets the most comments out of anything on this car. It sounds absolutely incredible, which you guys will hear here in a minute. And I also opted for the factory valve setting. That way, when I'm cruising in the comfort mode, the car is a little bit more quiet, but in sport mode, when things kind of tighten up and the engine spools up a little faster, those valves open up and it sounds absolutely incredible. I guess the last thing kind of technically under the hood was I did tune the car. So I pulled out the ECU, sent it to be unlocked by Femto. Is that how you say it? I don't know. I ship my ECU overseas, they unlock it, it comes back, and then it's available to be tuned. Unfortunately, that is kind of a long, lengthy process. For me, it only took about 10 days, but the car will be sitting in your garage with your ECU out, of course. Once it's unlocked though, you have a few different options. I personally opted for the MHD tuner. It simply plugs into the ODB2 port, and you can change a lot of different parameters on this vehicle. So right now, I'm running what they call like a stage 2 plus kind of tune, and I believe it's rated for 475 plus horsepower depending on your supporting mods. I have not dynoed this car yet. I don't really know what this thing is sitting at currently, but I will say it makes a lot more power than stock, sounds great, performs amazing, and I just absolutely love this car. So I think that's enough of me talking about this thing for now. Let's go for a drive and talk about some of the driving characteristics, get some engine notes, and go for a drive up here in the beautiful Colorado mountains. All right guys, sitting in the cabin of the car now, I'm just gonna give you a quick rundown of some of the features in here. It's all pretty standard, but for this caliber of a sports car, I think they kind of went above and beyond with everything that we got in here. So this is the 3.0 premium package, which is like the highest package that you can get in this. So we have the leather wrapped steering wheel, nice leather bucket seats, which really hug me. As far as the interior space goes, in my opinion, it's pretty comfortable. If you are maybe like 6'2", 6'3", or taller than that, it may feel a little bit cramped for you, but overall the seating position is very low and it's very comfortable to drive both aggressively and daily as well. Over on the door card, we have a little bit of storage down on the bottom, and that is one thing that is kind of lacking in this car is storage. We do have a nice big trunk, which is right behind the seats here, so I can actually reach into the back and grab some camera gear. It's big enough for a suitcase. I have picked up people at the airport in this car, and overall it's pretty practical. So we have door controls, mirror controls. The premium package does come with the JBL audio, so we have the tweeters in the doors, the door speakers down below, as well as two kind of subwoofers behind me. I believe they're just bigger speakers, but the audio sounds pretty dang nice. Lighting controls over to the left. All of your gauge cluster controls are found on the left stalk where your turn signals are. The right stalk is for your windshield wipers. They do have an automatic mode, which is a nice touch. And then for the steering wheel, over on the left-hand side, you do have cruise control, and this car does come with adaptive cruise as well. So when you're on those long hauls, you can just set that and kind of forget about it. The car will regulate its speed as needed. And then on the right-hand side, you can control everything from the infotainment, the phone calls, volume up and down, all of that good stuff. There are programmable buttons across the middle of the dash here, which I generally don't really use for anything, but there are a ton of settings packed into this infotainment screen. screen. You can change parameters of the car, you can change profiles, there's a lot of stuff that you can do, and I'm not going to go into that myself, but there's a bunch of videos out there online if you're curious. Climate controls down below that. This does have a wireless phone charger, which I don't really care for because it makes my phone overheat. I feel like most wireless chargers end up doing that, but you also have a USB port down here if you want to charge that way, and a 12-volt socket there, like a cigarette lighter. Now next to the gear shift, we have a jog wheel, which will allow you to control this nice touchscreen up here. I don't use that very often. I'd rather just kind of reach up here and touch the screen. To the left of the gear shift, we have the auto on and off. So if you are in the comfort mode and you come to a stop and let out of the clutch while you're in neutral, the car turns off. I hate that new cars have that, but it's really easy to disable, and when you're driving this car in sport mode, it automatically disables that. So for the most part, I am driving this car in sport mode, unless I'm looking for a more casual drive, just kind of cruising around town. Then you have your parking sensors, your traction control, your safety system, and all of your goodies down there. Of course, we have a glove box in front of the passenger and then a little bit of a map pocket down below. One thing that I find kind of interesting is that although the interior in here is small and the seats, there's nothing behind here except the speakers in the trunk, the passenger seat has a map pocket behind there. So you do have a little bit of extra storage back there. Sun visor with a light and a mirror, which I never really use. This thing is freaking tiny. And then your SOS features, all of your lighting for the interior here. No place to store sunglasses, which is a bummer. So typically I'll just kind of throw them in the door handle over here. And then in the center here, cup holders with some pretty poor placement, especially if you have a manual Supra, because it's kind of right in the way of your arm here. I've kind of gotten used to it and will typically shift at an angle if I got a water bottle in there, but it's not the end of the world. I just wish they would have put them staggered side by side back a little bit further, and then another little kind of storage compartment there where you can just drop stuff so it doesn't go flying around while you're driving. So that's a quick rundown of the interior. Now let's start this thing up and go for a drive. I'm going to start this in the first mode, which is the comfort mode, or like the eco mode. Clutch in, push to start over here. Startup does sound nice. Now, one of the things that I did with the tuning of this car is I actually tuned out the cold start. I obviously have been driving the car today, so it wouldn't have a high idle anyway, but if you start this car with a setup like this, the Boost Logic exhaust, when you're starting it cold, it high idles and it's very loud. So as a courtesy to my neighbors, I will typically start the car with the garage door closed. I tuned out the cold start, so I'll drive very slowly or not at all. I'll just kind of pull out and sit in the driveway for a little bit, and it idles like this. Even with the window down, you can tell it's pretty quiet. The interior overall is very quiet too, and I will say, which this isn't saying much, but this is probably the nicest vehicle that I've ever owned. There's a lot of really nice kind of creature comforts for a sports car like this. Now, if we're looking at the gauge cluster, I actually just hit 5,600 miles, which is pretty cool. You have the time, temperature, your trip, and then you can flip through the menu and look at your miles per gallon. Currently getting 24 miles per gallon, which is pretty insane with the way that I drive this car. And if I hit the sport mode button, you'll notice that the cluster turns from an orange to a red, and the tack looks a little bit different. There is a gear indicator right in the middle, so clutch in. Electric e-brake is on right now. A lot of people don't like this, but I could go either way. You can push it down to turn that e-brake off and the car will start moving, or if you have that e-brake engaged and put the car in drive, as I let out the clutch here, it will automatically turn off that e-brake, and now we can rip some mountain roads. So I currently have the car back into the comfort mode, which is changing some engine parameters. The three main things that it is changing is the exhaust, the steering and suspension feel, and also the acceleration curve, the sensitivity of the throttle. So right here I'm cruising at about 40 miles an hour. I'm in third gear, and you can tell it's pretty quiet in here. So like I mentioned, the Boost Logic exhaust that I chose had different options, and I of course chose the factory valve option. That way, when I'm in comfort mode, the valves close and you have a more quieter, a little bit more tame exhaust. The exhaust note still sounds great, but when you turn it into sport mode, those valves open up and it's going to get a lot louder. This exhaust doesn't really drone all that much. You'll hear a lot of the exhaust throughout this video, hopefully. And with those valves open, you're going to hear a lot of crackles and pops, especially once the car heats up and that exhaust gets a little bit hotter. So comfort mode is nice for that aspect. And then when it comes to the steering and suspension, it is very responsive, but it is a little softer than the sport mode. This comfort mode is great for driving around town if you have some rough roads and potholes. The ride's going to be a little bit softer overall, and maybe if you have a passenger who doesn't appreciate sports cars, then you're probably going to want to be in comfort mode because it just softens things out and it makes it a little bit more mellow. That being said though, the car still handles great even in this like softer mode because of the suspension, but even before all of that, this car from a stock standpoint handles absolutely phenomenally. With the addition of the HKS springs and the wheel spacers and the gas monoball units up front, the car handles really well. But if you want maximum performance, then you're going to want to obviously be in sport mode where things tighten up. And then the third parameter is that throttle sensitivity, and overall I think it feels pretty good in both modes, but you will notice that if you're driving at a consistent RPM or a consistent speed in the comfort mode, as soon as you are cruising, let's see if I can show you guys here. So I'm in second gear, I'm going to hold my speed at 27 miles per hour. Bump it into sport mode. You can notice that the amount of pressure that I'm putting on the accelerator goes up. So all that's really doing is increasing the throttle sensitivity. It will allow you to go a little bit faster, spool the engine up a little bit quicker, spool the turbo up quicker. And for the most part, this sport mode here is what I'm driving this car in. Again, back to comfort mode, quiets up in here. So if you have a passenger, maybe this is the mode for you. Now hopefully it's not too loud in here, but I am going to drive in sport mode because we are getting onto some fun mountain roads now. We're going to take it easy because there could be ice and snow up ahead. There's a lot of traffic with road bikers, but we're going to have a little bit of fun here in sport mode. Lots of engine noise, lots of turbo noises because of that arm speed intake. And now in sport mode, obviously the car's a lot louder. You're gonna start to hear a lot more crackles and pops because it's basically wide open. The steering is a lot tighter. The car is crazy responsive. Like, you just point it where you want it to go and it's going to go there. I am currently driving with the traction control on and the safety sensors and all that stuff on. I honestly don't really like driving while I'm on a public road with that stuff off because the car can get a little bit loose at times, especially because it's making more power. I'm still on the stock tires. I have not felt this car understeer at all. So the stock tires are pretty much okay for that, but because I am making more power, it can't put all of that power down, at least when it's kind of colder outside, the tires aren't completely warm yet. So that is a little bit of a limiting factor, at least for this specific setup that you're seeing. So absolutely no understeer on this car. There are some cases where if you're cornering really hard, you can feel the car start to step out a little bit, but with those driver assist on, it's really going to keep you in line, and it's honestly really hard to make this thing get out of control while you have the traction control on. There are a bunch of different settings in the infotainment like I mentioned, and if you wanted to basically blend both the sport and comfort modes, you could do that. So if you wanted a touchier throttle but softer suspension, you can go in and build a driver profile to reflect that. Maybe you want to have the exhaust valves open all of the time and you want it stiffer, but you don't want the throttle to be so sensitive. You can go in and change all of that stuff. I typically just run it on the different modes like I mentioned it to you guys. And here in sport mode, I mean, this thing just completely sticks to the pavement. Banging through the gears too, by the way, is amazing. I wasn't exactly sure what to expect with this transmission in this specific car, but the throw is super short. It's almost clicky, not quite as nice as like a gated transmission, but Typically on a sports car, I would think about installing a short shifter, and with this current setup, it's not even necessary. The extra weight of the Racing shift knob makes it feel even better than it did when it was stock. I typically like having a little bit more weight up there because it just makes things feel smoother overall. And again, I mean, you can just accelerate straight through corners like this, and as long as your tires are gripping up, it's gonna pull you straight through. Now, when it comes to the brakes on this car, that is something that I see people upgrade pretty often, and because I have not had this car on a track yet, I have not felt the need to upgrade the brakes, and honestly, I haven't even been in a situation where I've been full down, brake to the floor, because the brakes are very adequate, at least in my opinion. Once you get them hot, they may start glazing up a little bit. You may see a little bit of brake fade, but that's going to be more of like an autocross or track situation. So if you're putting a ton of pressure on your brakes over an extended amount of time, just like any car, they may heat up, but I have not experienced that yet, and everything feels pretty damn solid on this car. Yeah, now we're getting into a little bit of snow and ice and cinders, which is why I'm keeping that traction control on. But like I mentioned, it does a really good job, and it really keeps the car feeling like it's on rails. It'll keep you going in a straight line, or it'll keep you on track through a corner. Now, one thing that you will notice, you may have already noticed, is that I'm not double clutching. I'm not rev matching on my downshifts or anything like that, because another feature in here is that it has auto rev matching. A lot of cars have this now. It also comes with like a hill hold feature, so if I'm on a hill and the clutch is pressed in and the car's in gear, it's going to hold your position, that way you don't roll back. All of that is stuff that you can disable, but let me go up here in third gear. Listen to this. Third gear down into second, and the car will automatically rev match. That was a pretty extreme example there, and I personally like it. I've had it on my older STI in the past, and it's a nice feature, but if you want an even more engaging driving feel, that's something that you can disable. Oh, I just love the way this car sounds. Handles so freaking well. And the car is really small too. If you guys can't really tell in photos and videos, which it is a little bit difficult to tell, but you have a lot of hood out the front because you have that inline 6 up there, and then the rear end is pretty short. So you have basically the rear wing. I could almost reach back and touch it because of how short the rear end of this car is. But everything feels really well balanced. You have the rear wheel drive basically right behind my butt, and it's very, very predictable. You will notice a little bit of wheel spin, especially when the tires are not completely warmed up. Going through that corner back there, I saw my traction control light blinked for just a second, but it is so quick to respond that you don't even really notice anything with the car. Now, if I slow down, let's see if we have a straightaway up here. Still more corners. All right, here's a little bit of a straightaway. I'm going to try to launch the car real quick just to show you that these tires aren't the best when you're making upwards of 450 horsepower. So spins in first and second, chirps in third. Not the best launch because, of course, I was just kind of giving it everything there. Let's try that one more time, but try to get a better, kind of more controlled launch. All right, here we go. Woo! So, I'm not going full out there, and I could definitely feel the power getting put down a little bit more. Still spun in first, still spun in second, and chirped the tires in third. So I'm curious down the line if in the summertime when the tires are warm and the road is a little bit warmer, if I'm running a better tire, I'm curious to see how well this thing will hook up. This like 450-ish, which is an estimate by the way, haven't had it dynoed. This type of power on this weight and size of car, to me, is almost perfection. I don't think I would want really any more power because obviously it's going to have trouble putting the power down. And also from a practicality standpoint, the car is still very drivable. If I pop it into comfort mode, now things get a little bit quieter. You can have a conversation with the person next to you. And the steering is a little bit looser, suspension feels softer. It's honestly a really comfortable ride. You don't have a lot of storage space up front, but you do have that decent sized trunk in the rear, so you could take this thing to a grocery store. You might be able to fit like a set of golf clubs in the back. It might be pretty tight back there depending on the size of the bag, but it's pretty functional, at least in my opinion. I always travel around with a bunch of camera gear back there, obviously, and I do try to drive this car as much as possible whenever the weather is nice, like it happens to be today. Now, as for the power delivery of this car, obviously it's not very linear because of the turbo on there. I would say normal cruising is obviously from like 1 up until about 3,000. Once you get to 3,000, that is when you're going to start to hear and feel that turbo spooling up. So here I'm at about 25, just below 3. That's when you'll start to hear a lot more noises. And anything above 3 is when it starts to pull super hard. Woo! Oh man. The power delivery definitely feels like it comes on a lot faster when you're in that sport mode due to the increased throttle sensitivity. And to be honest, I may seem a little biased here because I picked the car and did all the modifications to it, but there's not a whole lot that I would change about this thing. For me personally, it is a great balance of kind of a do-it-all car. It's definitely leaning towards the more sporty aspect of things, and a lot of people will buy this car just as a fun kind of weekend driving car. But in this comfort mode with all the features and everything that you get, heated seats and climate control and all the safety features, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, this is still a very practical sports car that can do a little bit of everything. And when you look at this car and the price point compared to some other things that give you similar features, similar driving experience, power and all of that, when you put a Supra like this up against cars that are almost double, sometimes 3 times the price point, I think the Supra does a really good job at holding its own. It's a very quick, fast, nimble car, a car built for true car enthusiasts. And while a lot of Toyota purists don't appreciate a lot of the BMW drivetrain, Toyota developed it directly with them, which was a huge increase to the quality. So it's essentially BMW performance and Toyota quality. So I'm hoping down the line I don't run into any issues. I hope everything about this car kind of stays on par with like my Tacoma. I'm hoping the Supra can live up to the Toyota quality that everyone knows about, and I'm hoping that I can drive this car for years and years to come. So that was a whole lot of talking, just a bunch of brain dumping about this car. If I missed anything, or if you guys have any questions on anything, let me know in the comments down below. I'll try to answer anything as best as possible. The next time you see this car might not be for a little while because we are currently in the middle of winter, even though it seems like summer outside. Now that we're getting higher up in the mountains, you'll notice a bunch of snow to my left, but it's still warm out here. Once the roads clear up and we are done getting snow in Colorado, you'll see the car a lot more. I'm hoping for some autocross and track days this year. And there may be a few more subtle mods that I will bring you guys install and review videos of in the future. So until then, if you guys are new to this channel, consider clicking subscribe because I make new videos every single week. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one.